Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Pulp Literature Friday Live Read series, broadcasting from. So we have with us today Lena Mahmoud from California, Dave Gregory from Kitchener, Ontario, and Wallace Cleaves, also from California. And we've got 3 readings today. And first of all, I just wanted to welcome you all and say how delightful it is to have you all here. A little bit of introduction to Lena. Lena Mahmoud is the author of Amrikia, which is the book you can see up on screen right now, which was a winner of the Arab American Book Award. She was a finalist for the Louise Merriweather First Book Prize and won a Forward's 4 phenomenal debut novels, which is pretty high praise for this novel. And she's also been nominated for 2 pushcarts. Her story, The Thieving Pot, was in issue 23 of Pulp Literature. And I'll let you go on and say a little bit more about it.
Okay, thank you. So today, what I'm actually going to be reading is like a prequel to the story that I had published in Pulp Literature last summer. And so this is like a flash fiction piece because the story I had published before that would take like 15 minutes to read. And this is told from the perspective, instead of the daughter pod, it's told from the perspective of the mother and why she wanted to have a cooking pot as a daughter.
Oh,
And it's
fabulous.
it's called the beloved tonjura, which tonjura is basically a pot in Arabic. And so I'll just go into that. In a time long ago, when Palestine was free, there lived Farah, an unmarried woman in a small house. It had previously belonged to Riyama and Baba, and she remained with them until she was well past marriageable age. But now, with her parents buried deep in the village soil, the whispers about Farah's current state grew frenzied and frequent. Never before had a woman, spinster or no, lived alone. Many thought her incapable of managing a household. And though she was far from beautiful, they worried she would descend into indecency without the watchful eye of at least one man. Still, the villagers did the proper thing, bringing vegetables, fruits, spices, and even meats so Farah could sustain herself. After a few days, Farah noticed the tonjara, the antique pot, that her mother dusted every day and brought out only for the most important guests. She took out some vegetables and meats from her storage and chopped and gutted them with an urgency she had never felt before in her listless life. She cooked her makeshift stew over the tapu, the outdoor village oven, and she could hardly wait for it to cool before she took a bite. It was the most delicious food she had ever tasted in her life. Farah had once filled her days with sewing and embroidery, but now cooking consumed her. The food beckoned children from all over the village. They devoured the stews and beans and yogurt Farah made in her tonjara. So I guess she's a lot like people in quarantine, making lots of food. The older ones would often bring wood to keep her fires lit, and all feasted on Farah's meals together. She inquired about their lives, and many loved to tell her their stories. It was rare to find an adult who would listen without criticism. The children did not see her as strange, and they looked at Farah's home with curiosity instead of the disdain and pity their parents possessed. But as the freshness of her loss faded, they demanded their children stay away, concerned that their affection for her would cause them to inherit her Majnuna ways. That left Farah in want of a child, one that can never be taken from her. For so long she had assumed having children required a husband, but the past week showed her she could be a mother without a man. How she could acquire a child alone remained a puzzle to her, though. She sat in the corner of her house, clutching the empty tonjara. She let out a shuddering sigh, and one tear fell down her cheek, landing on the lid. The tear, filled with decades of desire and disappointment, gave the tonjara a pair of eyes and a mouth. Yamma, the tonjara called in a high, childlike voice. Farah lifted the tonjara to see its face for the first time. "Masha Allah," she said, beaming. "My tonjar. And with that, Farah had a daughter of her own. And later, the daughter will cause wreak all kinds of havoc on the village. Thank you.
That was wonderful. That was an unexpected pleasure to hear that story from the point of view of the mother. So now, if you want to hear the longer version of what trouble the daughter gets into, you can read that in issue 23. So
Thank you.
this is based on a folk tale. Do you write a lot from folk tales, or was this a one-off sort of thing?
Um, Occasionally, I did, but this is the one I've worked with the most. So, the Tundra Tundra, that's what the folktale is called. Um, and this, I actually wrote the story that's public, the longer story, the Thieving Pot, that's in pulp literature. I actually wrote that about 10 years ago. This story I just wrote from, I think I wrote it in the summer, and I kind of thought that it was maybe something I'd want to explore more. When, like, I guess as I've gotten older, I thought the mother's perspective was maybe something that might be a little more interesting too, in addition to the pot daughter's perspective.
I love that. It just on a personal note, my current novel series is on the point of from the point of view of mother, daughter, and grandmother. So, I, you know, I personally quite love stories that look at things from the point of view of different family members and how they change. Um, so, tell us a little bit about your novel.
So Amrikia, it's about so it's told from one perspective. It's personality. So one of the narratives is sort of her early adulthood and her marriage, and then it's interspersed with chapters from her childhood. And she is well, basically, after her mother passes away, her father has his cousin and his family raise her. So she's had her share of troubles with them, and then also when she gets married, as when most people, as most marriages, she has a lot of trouble in terms of the two of them getting along and stuff like that.
Right. And I assume you can buy this at the usual outlets, the most bookstores and online and things like that.
Yeah, so on my website, I have the links to everywhere it can be bought. And also, I mean, if you just Google it, I'm sure it'll come up as where you can buy it, where you can purchase it.
All right. Oh, and before we let you go, I do have a question from the audience. First of all, Mel said, terrific reading, loved the story in issue 23.
Thank
And
you.
Jessica Fabricius asks, can you speak to the importance of the tundra in your writing and or culture?
So the Tundra, who it's literally going to be named just Tundra, um, it's important because it's well, the way the folktale was originally told. It's mostly that the Tundra steals from people because it doesn't know that it's wrong to take from people. So it's the mother's, I guess, her job to teach um, the the pot to not do that. But in my retelling, it's more that the pot does know what she's doing. She just kind of feels that she and her mother have been marginalized, and that it's, it's sort of the right thing back on the stuff.
Right. I kind of like that. I think I think I like her having a little bit more agency and a little bit more mischief is a nice turn on it.
Yeah, that was kind of my perspective too.
Well, thank you for that lovely reading, and stick around for the end. I'm going to bring Dave Gregory onto the stage now. So, Greg, Gregory is a Canadian writer who's worked on cruise ships and sailed the world for nearly 2 decades. He's an associate editor with the Los Angeles-based Exposition Review, and his work has appeared in numerous literary publications, including Type House, Firewords, and the Nashwauk Review. His story, Joran's Song, is due out in our summer issue, issue 27, which we don't have the cover ready for, so why we have this beautiful illustration for the story done by Mel Anastasiou. So, welcome, Dave. How are you doing out there in Kitchener?
Thanks. Great to be here. I'm doing great. I've been social distancing since 2017, so I don't notice anything different. It's a beautiful spring day outside. Tulips are almost in bloom. Daffodils are out. I think it's great. Life is good.
Well, I'm glad you're weathering this so well out there. And it's always nice. In Ontario, spring is even more welcome, I think, than it is here in BC. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. Well, I think Mel's illustration captures it kind of perfectly there. It's backpackers at a restaurant terrace. I actually wrote this as a study of movement. I mean, it is quite a tragic story. I'm going to read the fun part today. But I was listening to a Yorker podcast, and what I was hearing was just a lot of movement being described. And I wanted to give that a try. So I thought of this episode. Part of this really did happen. Somebody did teach me the dance moves about 20 years ago, and I just thought I'd incorporate them into a story where I would teach myself a little better how to write movement.
Well, wonderful. Let's hear it.
Okay. I knew him less than 24 hours, but when he died 15 years later, I considered him a friend. The night we met, he had the nerve to tell me, "You're trying too hard." My right eyebrow leapt halfway up my forehead. Excuse me? I was in a small but crowded hotel bar on the Greek island of Syros, ordering a second round of drinks for some women in the corner. Beside me, on a stool, sat a short, dark-haired man with sun-drenched skin. They're backpackers. They seek adventure, not potential husbands. Sentences, the best anyone could do about blaring speakers. You're bragging about law school. They won't remember who studied where or who bought drinks. They'll remember who had the cojones to dance with them. He had a point. Maybe. Puts me at a disadvantage, though. I can't dance. Madre mia, everyone can dance. He dismissed my helpless shrug, told me to forget the drinks, and led me to the quieter, cooler terrace. A dozen hotel guests talking and drinking occupied tables and chairs beneath a white, sloped awning. Some sat on bar stools at the long counter, watching reflections of city light shimmer across the bay. I'm Joran, from Mexico. I'll teach you moves any white boy can do. His smile reflected innocence. I was intrigued rather than offended. Can you shop? He asked. What? That eyebrow again. Show me how you push a cart. I played along and extended my arms, elbows slightly bent. Now to the beat. Joran balled his fists and read out. His voice changed to song. Shop, shop. He bounced to the music coming from inside the hotel. Top shelf on the left. Each line and put it in the cart. I followed, keeping one arm steady. I raised the other and reached for an imaginary overhead item, then dropped it in the pretend cart. Now top shelf on the right. And put it in the cart. And shop, and shop. Long aisles of boxed cereals, jarred sauces, and canned vegetables materialized. Every reach was a his hand turned tubular hand cart. And shop, and shop, and shop. Continued singing, pushing, and selecting groceries. 3 backpackers stared and laughed. Our moves looked absurd until I peered through plate glass windows and witnessed dozens of people in the bar whose dance steps paralleled ours. Now, sprinkler. Joran put the palm of his right hand behind his head, and pointed the other arm in the same direction as his right elbow. And sprinkler, and sprinkler. Pumping with his bent arm, he watched the fingers of his left hand sweep in a steady arc. Horan twisted his upper body as he could. His feet stopped pumping. Lips vibrating to the sound, his head bobbed. In one fluid motion, his left arm swung back to where it started. I conjured a lush green lawn dappled with sunlight. A thick stream of water pulsed through the air. A rainbow hovered in the mist. When I tried, 3 hotel guests accompanied me, sprinklering in unison. Next came the lawn, low and across one hand, pulling back the shoulder height. Every movement, real and mundane, closely echoed the confident gyrations of those on the dance floor. The remaining travelers on the patio moved aside tables and chairs to join us. A slight breeze drifted past. Horan's soothing voice, filled with laughter, marshaled us in time. And start the mower. And start the mower. And shop. And shop. And shop and shop and shop. Now sprinkler. Now sprinkler. And back. Our circle expanded as more travelers emerged from the bar, including the women whose drinks I'd meant to buy. Joran declared us ready for window washer, forward thrust, and booty slap, which we easily perfected. If I'd known dancing could be so easy, I'd have avoided many awkward moments in darkened high school gymnasiums. A few more beers, and you'll figure out Murab and helicopter shirt on your own. Andale! Joran led his followers inside. This is how they'll remember you, amigo, he said to me as we stepped onto the dance floor, which we dominated for the rest of the evening.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dave, and thanks for that animated display. That was great. For those of you watching the live stream, you may have found that the motion was overwhelming it and it was cutting out, but the video recording should be fine. So the recorded version, it was looking fine on my end, so I think the recorded version will be good. You outdanced YouTube.
I'll put that on my CV.
So I'm going to let you take a break and catch your breath, and we'll come back for questions at the end. All right. I'm going to bring on our last guest for the day, Wallace Cleaves. So Wallace, he's an associate professor of teaching in the university writing program at the University of California, Riverside. He also teaches courses in medieval Renaissance and Native American literature. He's a member of the Gabrielino Tongva Native American Nation, which is in the LA area. And he's going to write positions on the Tribal Council for the Curravunga Springs Foundation. He does have some writing credits, Student's Companion for the St. Martin's Guide to Writing, a little drier than most of the novels that our guests have. But he also published Mission Project Activism on a Smaller Scale in World Literature Today's web magazine, and I'll put a link to that up on the YouTube channel afterwards. His story, A Parable of Things That Crawl and Fly, was in the winter issue of Pulp Literature this year. It was co-written with Graham Robert Scott, who is going to be our guest next week. So they're each going to read a different section of this story. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Of course. Miha, Nyatwanyane Weha. That's just saying hello, and my Tongva name is Weha. This is a work of Graham Scott and I have been friends for almost 30 years, more than 30 years, and have collaborated on a lot of stuff. It's really great to work with my best friend, and he and I both shared a love of indigenous speculative fiction and kind of an emerging area, and we really wanted to create a story that kind of captured that. And this is really a lot about generational issues and generational trauma, and thinking back into the past and into the future, which speculative fiction I think can really do in a way that other things can't. And it includes some of the Tongva, some versions of the Tongva creation myth in it as well. And it starts with the Tongva creation story. The Tongva creation story we like to tell our children has several versions. One goes like this. Long, long ago, there was only the endless sea below and the sentient sky above. All of that sameness in all directions seemed wrong to the sky. One day, however, the sky discovered 7 bumps in the great ocean. He liked the way each broke the monotony. He brought his great face closer to see them better. 7 bumps, far apart, 7 bumps, and sometimes they moved. 7 bumps, each one the shell of an enormous turtle rising high above the water. The sky spoke to the turtles, then saying, "Gather here, for I have need of you." Obedient creatures, the turtles gathered beneath his face. Easily exhausted creatures, they fell into a deep sleep, resting on the waves. The sky didn't mind. Their sleep served his purpose well. He reached down into the ocean, plunging his hands through the surface of the sea. As the sky's forearms pierced the ocean, he impregnated the waters with an abundance of life. Fish and swimming things of all varieties came into being. Deeper and deeper the sky's arms plunged, and when his hands reached the bottom of the sea, he kept pushing, through the muck and slime and the sand and rock that lies below. In doing so, he generated all the crawling and wriggling things that live on the ocean floor. Now with his hands deep into the rock, the sky heaved up huge mountains of earth from the heart of the world, wreaking terrible violence to sea and earth, but spawning more living things wherever he touched. Once the sky had enough earth, he heaped it on the backs of the 7 sleeping turtles. He lumped rocks together to craft mountains. He scooped out hollows to carve valleys. All the world we know exists on the back of those turtles, which live still, pinned to the ocean floor under the obscene weight piled upon them by the sky. After Yurok paid the car and it hummed down the road, I kept him at bay, doing grandmotherly things. I listened to Temecula burble about something she saw on the drive over, made her a sandwich, brought her juice and a cookie. I called her Topangna, a proper Tongva name, which made her giggle and her father frown. She had snacks on the road, Yurok protested, hovering, clearly wanting to talk about whatever he had come to talk about, which would almost certainly cost me time or money. I helped Temecula eat, listened to her some more, cooed at her, cleaned her up, then laid her on the table to check her diaper. I found it light, unencumbered, pristine. Then I remembered Yurok's car stopping on the road and realized he'd stopped to change her before arriving, anticipating I would check. Out of spite, I changed her diaper anyway, and behind me, I heard Yurok sigh. Temecula gave me a puzzled look, until she heard Raven calling outside, and started looking through the window for him. After I bounced her on my lap for a spell, feeling her first grip, my index finger, she burbled some more at me. I regretted not having a Rosetta Stone to decipher it all. That was often my difficulty, translating my relations. Always too young or too dead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I love me a turtle story.
Me too.
and I love myth, and I love that we've had 2 stories based in myth for this May Day morning reading. So it's really great to see. I have just a personal question about the word Topanga. There used to be a Topanga cafe here in Vancouver, and I never realized
really?
It was a Tongva word. I just always assumed it was a Mexican word. So
No, it's a good Tongva word mispronounced. It should be Tapangna, but because all of our words end, and we have Rancho Cucamonga, and we have Atsuzanga, which became Azusa, and we have a number of them, but they've been kind of mispronounced so much it's sometimes hard to tell.
There was a comment here from Gray and Scott that the World Literature Today piece is great. So there's a message from your co-writer there.
Thank you, Graham.
And I'm going to bring all three writers onto stage now, just because we have some questions have come in, and just some comments. Everybody thought the Dave Gregory story was incredibly entertaining, even with the skipping. And a comment for you, Wallace, at the gorgeous writing. Diana Slamyak that I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Said, Slampiak, yes. No.
Slampiak. Okay. It's run together with that. That was beautiful. Alana Kay said, love that story. So, yeah. And I think there were some clapping hands in the audience during Dave's piece as well. I wanted to ask you all, and I suppose this is particularly pertinent for you, Wallace, since you teach creative writing, but I wanted to ask everybody what their one piece of advice for a writer who's wanting to get going would be. So let's start with Lena. We'll go from left to right here.
I think, well, in terms of just doing the writing itself, I think it's just important to actually get it started, to make the time, because I think that's usually the big difficulty, and to actually give yourself the time to explore what it is you want to say.
Wallace, what about you?
Well, of course, finding that, just actually writing is the most critical thing, but to do something different, finding a community. And I have to just say again, Oesh Koneha, thank you to Graham. I wouldn't have written this if he hadn't kind of pushed me. Finding somebody that you can collaborate with, who can read your work, give you feedback on it. There's nothing like that. And it's very rare to find somebody that you can work with so easily.
And Dave?
For my advice about writing, if you want to write, read. It's as simple as that. Just read as much as you can. Read everything you can get your hands on. When you're reading, you think about how you would like to do it, what you want to say. It'll bring all sorts of ideas into your head. You'll have all the help you'll need. In order to be able to write well is simply to read.
And that's perfect.
As a writing instructor, I echo that.
And that perfectly segues me into my next question, which was, what are you guys reading right now? If it's something you want to admit to or recommend, that is.
Well, I'm reading a poetry book called My Name on His Tongue by Lena Mahmoud. And it's basically it's kind of like, I would say, like, it's sort of like a coming of age story, but in poems.
Nice. And sorry, what was that? What was the author again?
Layla Halaby.
Okay.
The last name is spelled Halaby.
Right. And Wallace, what about you? What are you reading right now?
Well, I'm teaching a class on fairy tales, and so I'm reading. We're all reading Maria Tatar's classic fairy tales. But I'm also sometimes reading them to my daughter while having to edit them occasionally, trying to give her, she's almost old enough to get the unexpurgated Grimm's versions, and seeing how wonderfully horrible they are, and sharing that experience with my students who are seeing them afresh.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what about you, Dave?
I'm reading almost exclusively short stories. I did finish Washington Black. That was a novel that came out last year. But for the most part, I'm reading short stories, often things that are about 100 years old. Janet Frame, Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty, a number of the classic short story writers. Oh, Somerset Maugham, I should mention. But I'm also reading a lot of contemporary short stories as well, like the same short stories that I see advertised all over Twitter. Like I just read Josh Denslow's book, Not Everyone is Special, Kathy Fish's wildlife book, plus several other contemporary short story books and microfiction.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I find short fiction is good in stressful times. It gives you something to dive into, escape quickly, and then get out again.
Yeah, and that's what I'm writing now. I'm writing almost exclusively short fiction, so that's what I'm trying to focus on, the reading.
A few more comments came in from the audience. Graham Scott said, "Same right back, my friend," to Wallace, and Alana Kay said, "As a Vancouverite who lived in San Diego for years, I'm familiar with those names, but had no idea how to pronounce them. So thank you for that."
And some of the tribes near San Diego do share some of those stories too, so that's neat.
Very cool. Well, we are out of time. I cannot believe how fast this half hour goes. In the grip of good stories. So thank you to all my guests. Stay well, stay safe. And next week, we are going to have Graham Robert Scott come and read some more of that wonderful story. We're going to have F.J. Bergman, and I don't know what she's going to read. She's done many stories with us, and they're all hilarious. And Mary Rykov, it turns out, is unavailable next week, so I believe we will be having Susan Peters on to read one of her many stories. So again, to all our audience, thank you for watching. Thank you for your questions. Stay well, stay safe, stay happy.